Hello and welcome to what is set to be an incredibly informative and thought-provoking discussion on artificial intelligence in post-trade. In this session, our esteemed lineup of panelists will be discussing the potential of the technology in back-office operations, highlighting what's hype and what's real, some of the potential use cases for the technology, and hopefully giving us some examples of the technology in action as we really look to move the conversation on from previous years. I'm John Watkins, I'm the Managing Editor of Global Custodian magazine, and I'll be moderating the panel alongside these four wonderful minds alongside me. We have Tom Castellin, who is the Global Head of Custody at BNY Mellon Asset Servicing. I'm going to jump around here. John Kane, who leads Amazon Web Services' worldwide business and market development efforts for the capital markets. Michael McGovern, Head of Investor Services and FinTech at Brown Brothers Harriman, and Christina Soviani, co-founder and CEO of Features Analytics. Welcome and thank you all for joining us today. I'd just like to remind everyone that it's an interactive session, so there will be some questions coming up through the app, which you can vote on. I want to start by quoting a piece that was recently published on the Global Custodian, where it was written that some business executives think that artificial intelligence is critical to the future of their business, while simultaneously not really knowing exactly what it is or how to deploy it. And I think what that means is that not everybody is an AI expert. And that's fine, not least because we have four people here that are, but I don't think that it's quite an integral part of post-trade just yet. I think we know intuitively what AI is. You know, there's some examples in our personal lives that it's impressive, if not a little bit terrifying here and there. But I think there's often some confusion when it's in the context of financial services. So, Christina, I want to come to you first. I've noticed your career is involved in some wonderful things with AI. But what kind of AI technology is out there to use? And perhaps you can explain kind of where RPA ends and where AI starts?
Thank you for the question, John. I'm quite excited to be here today in this amazing panel. I would maybe start with an answer at your second question. So where does RPA end and where AI starts? Let's start with some simple definitions. So what are RPA systems? There are systems designed to automate business flows, but also repetitive human tasks. If I want to give an area from the financial crime compliance solutions, where we are specialized, for me, all rule-based solutions are kind of RPAs, if they are designed in the right way. Now, going to the definition of the AI systems, I would define them by systems able to simulate human intelligence. And when I say this, I refer to systems that are trained to solve certain tasks. I mean, even from humans, you cannot expect that they would tackle and be experts in all the fields in this world. So they are really specialized in their field. And it's the same with the AI. Now, people call the stage of AI today artificial narrow intelligence, but for me, it's really general, I would say, artificial intelligence. Now, what are the methodologies in AI technologies? I would classify them in three categories. First is natural language processing techniques, which are used a lot in conversational AI, in extracting information from legal documents, for instance, extracting key information from financial products. How viable are these financial products to be offered to consumers? In chatbots, obviously, used a lot in the financial industry. The second main group, I would classify it as machine learning techniques, and here there are two main categories. I'm talking about supervised machine learning systems that are able to learn from examples in the data. Just to give a simple An example, a simple example, from my field again, there are machine learning systems that can be trained to identify fraudulent transactions versus genuine transactions. But there are also unsupervised machine learning systems where you do not receive any examples in the data to which these transactions or records belong, and then you need to to develop the right technology in order to classify this in the right classes, to classify this data. And here I have a very good example, but I will come back at it. For instance, example of surveillance of the financial markets, detection of manipulations, where the examples are really very rare, so you cannot learn from examples. And at least here at Features Analytics, we design a technology, a unique technology where you can learn by comparison. And then there is a third big category of AI systems based on deep learning, where these are systems that are trying to emulate the functioning of the human brain by using several layers of abstractions. Now, the disadvantage of these systems is that they need a lot of examples to learn from, and because there are several layers of abstractions, these solutions are not explainable. And I believe in the financial industry, you need explainable solution.
Yeah.
Now, just to round my answer of AI technologies, I think no matter what you use, of course there are particular methodologies for particular use cases. What is important is to use AI solutions, especially in the financial industry, which are explainable. So you need to understand logic and the decisions behind a certain case, but also solutions that can adapt. They are fluid, they can adapt with the data in the same scoring production environment is very important. So.
Good. I'm really looking forward to hearing about some of these examples of the technology in action. John, let me come to you next. Great to have a representative from AWS on the panel today. You're dealing with all kinds of clients, everything from hedge funds to investment banks to custodians as well. With that kind of broad vision, what do you see as the potential applications across financial services for AI?
Sure. And we see some similar patterns, right? So I think if you look at some of the more public sort of actual uses of AI, particularly in the surveillance and compliance space, as you mentioned, fraud, relatively kind of low-hanging fruit in that area. We are seeing it in the transaction surveillance space, very much from a market surveillance perspective. FINRA has been one of the leading companies there as it builds out its own sort of capabilities for machine learning. It really uses that for market surveillance, very much because smart rules just generate too many false positives to really be kind of efficient. And certainly we've seen the growth in the compliance stabs over the last few years to kind of keep up with that. So there's a lot of focus, particularly there and on the AML transaction side, of both using machine learning to better tune the smart rules that we have today, but more importantly, to find kind of new patterns. And even on the enterprise side, you see firms like Actimize kind of offering the ability to kind of build your own models in the cloud and kind of bring it back to your own surveillance pattern. Certainly in the natural language processing side, I think some of the most exciting things are going on there. If you look at the sort of Siemens Financial, in the process of doing due diligence, you have to check your documents, make sure they have what you're looking for, and whether it's something as simple as, did a pipeline get inspected? Do I have an intellectual property assignment as part of that? There's enough pattern in the documents there that you can actually automate that quite a degree. I mean, Siemens moved a process that took them 12 hours down to kind of 30 seconds. And you see the ability to kind of pull out those key things as being critical. FINRA does something similar when you submit sort of a private placement to them. One of the things they have to do as part of screening is see if you're allowed to participate in a private. Just the ability to identify organizations and names within documents, have them automatically tagged so you can look up against impacted, kind of saves 80% of the time in the process. Market's done something similar on the commodity side, just tracking the delivery of commodities across the globe from warehouse to warehouse. Incredibly paper-driven process, right? The ability to capture that, normalize it across languages, and then actually make that available to traders, both for trading and settlement, but also to understand sort of their ability to hedge, critically important. Certainly you've talked about sort of all we've seen in customer interactions, sort of chatbots are sort of a given now, both from a customer and information lookup. Certainly we see that on voice technologies, but even sort of customer onboarding. You can see now where you can use your mobile device to onboard. You do authentication just by taking a photograph, compare it to a government, and then boom, it's a step in the process that used to take somebody to look up before. Coinbase, just because in the crypto space, has an interesting example there where they don't just compare it against one document, they actually compare it against their entire suite of images to make sure people aren't opening kind of accounts with the same photograph under different names, right? A process in the past that when they had to do it would take them 20 hours, they can kind of get it down to a couple of minutes. So we're certainly seeing there. And then sort of on the trading portfolio balancing, I think the robo-advisor craze has sort of been driven by the ability to kind of automatically rebalance a portfolio. A lot of that's driven by machine learning, figuring out the right time to rebalance, right time for tax loss harvesting. Makes those incredibly efficient from a return, but also from an operations perspective. And then certainly on sort of the hedge fund side, those firms generally won't share what they're actually working on, but the vast amounts of alternative data, whether it's satellite imagery or kind of social media feeds that they're using to kind of trade off again, is pretty amazing. I mean, I think there was an article just in the journal last week where they had a group of traders at JP Morgan trying to take, the President Trump's Twitter feed and try to tie it to the VIX to see if there's a trading strategy there. So it gives you a sense that there's a lot of different opportunities that people are using across. So I think it's actually pretty broad adoption across the industry right now.
Yes, thanks. And thank you both for your comments there. And let's come over to Mike and Tom now and talk about where it relates to security services. Plenty of manual processes lingering in that sector. So, Michael, what do you see as the potential use cases in the post-trade? Could you highlight a couple of areas where it might be applicable?
Sure, yeah. Well, I'd say, again, post-trade, back office, even middle office of FIs and asset managers. I mean, we're a couple years into our journey. I like to call it augmented intelligence instead of artificial intelligence, just on general principles, but because we're not talking about Skynet quite yet. But I mean, quite frankly, we see it. We see machine learning more broadly, which incorporates elements of natural language processing, natural language generation, primarily supervised ML, and even some deep learning as the killer app in scare quotes for the back office. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, what we're dealing with in most cases, we've got mature automation around asset classes, around settlement cycles, around asset servicing processes. But inevitably, inevitably, there's a last mile of manual processing that's still unaddressed. Well, what we've seen in a few of the use cases that we've looked at, which we can get into in a bit more depth, is a profound impact on that sort of remaining, and if you think about it, that's all the manual work that's left, in a particular process in security services. So, I mean, we can talk about some of the use cases around reconciliation, around anomaly detection, and get into them in some detail. But we see this as, I mean, it is very much a spectrum. We were talking about that before we started, this idea of classical process redesign, re-engineering, now being automated through workflow tools, robotic process automation, and then the introduction of these new, and frankly, the techniques are not new. The techniques have been around for decades. Yeah. Maths have been around for decades. It's really the data is the difference. And maybe I'll just end on that point. It's the, when we all studied statistics in school, right, it was parametric statistics. So, we had our 20 data points on a page, and then we had our 1,000 data points in a spreadsheet. Well, thanks to our friends at Amazon and Google and elsewhere, we now have 1 billion data points. And with 1 billion data points, you can get a pretty good approximation of an answer to a particular data-driven question.
Mm-hmm. Tom, anything to add on that?
Yeah, I think AI is, an important element in that journey, right? And if we look at the way that we're digitizing the bank, we're talking about the way that we split it up is digitizing the core processing, settlements, income tax, corporate actions, the core, right? Then digitizing the client experience, how the client interacts with that core, and then potentially you look at, well, what other data products or what other products can you develop to add value to the organization. And then the way that we look at those 3 horizons, we then look at different ways of achieving that, right? RPA and machine learning, artificial intelligence, maybe one area, partnerships maybe another area. But basically, to your point, cleaning up your data is probably the first area where you need to start. And then when you look at specifically at AI, I think there are examples and looking at the categorization pretty much that you described in that whole area of association, classification, optimization. You can look at fail prediction, you can look at those kind of things, and maybe we can talk a bit more about that. Natural language processing, and I mean, advanced OCR, I call it, right? Instruction capture. I mean, it's still, unfortunately, in our business, there is still a lot of, paper instructions, or there are email instructions, etc., that you want to STP through. So that's an area that we can look into. And then that whole image recognition part, just applying it to signature verification, right? There is a lot of signature verification that still goes on in our business, and those are the kind of areas that we look into.
Yeah, great. And as we've said, AI isn't new, maths isn't new. But in the context of financial services, perhaps we've been having these conversations for a few years, but forgive me, this is a journalist inside me for asking this question, but does the hyperbole around AI actually match the kind of sentiment of the post-trade industry, or are we on another kind of blockchain-esque path of everyone wanting to be seen to be saying something really positive about it, but then perhaps not really knowing what to do with it? And that's not directed at anyone. It's whoever's brave enough to take that question on.
Well, I'll start.
Yeah.
No question about it. I mean, I think the hype is happening. It's important to remember, and this is back to it's not quite Skynet yet, right? So we're talking about intelligence without cognition, right? So we shouldn't conflate the two. And despite certain technology firms' penchant for applying the anthropomorphic principle as a marketing strategy, we're still talking about narrowly defined, specific, as Christina said, classes. We're not talking about general AI, much broader, bigger problem. I'm a career technologist in security services, so I can't help but invoke the Gartner hype curve. I think we're still approaching the peak of inflated expectations, but the trough of disillusionment is still ahead of us. I think the techniques are powerful, and when applied with the right subject matter expertise, can have a profound impact. But they're not fit for purpose for anything, any sort of business problem. But I would suggest starting with a business problem rather than the hype is the way to go.
Yeah, and if I could just I think I agree certainly from sort of the expectation setting, but I think the technology itself is real and the price points continue to go down. So I think you'll actually see broader applicability. I think right now what we're dealing with is a shortage of people that are talented both on the machine learning side, but also on the business case data side, right?
Yeah.
And when you look at sort of what I think most of the firms that I deal with struggle with is that the list of opportunities they have to apply machine learning is far larger than the resources they have internally to actually go address it. Certainly from a technology perspective, our focus has been sort of making it easier for data scientists to be more effective with the tools they have, and then to take those sort of undifferentiated things like OCR or image recognition, make them available as sort of API services so you don't need data science expertise. But I still think we're at the point where the industry itself doesn't have enough data science expertise to actually match the number of challenges. And so you're right. I think people have gotten the idea that, I can just pour a bunch of data into a machine learning process and out's going to pop an answer. And it certainly doesn't work that way.
Yeah, just to add on to that, I mean, we talk about a machine learning mindset. And, that we had some bumps, some RPA implementations that did not, have the effect that we hoped for. The reality of dealing with very brittle implementations if you've got a high change environment. And that sort of had, it caused us to step back, look at the skill sets we were deploying in our tech lab and our innovation center, and begin to, start with business challenge, really. Our head of business transformation, if he was here, would be saying, don't talk to me about machine learning, don't talk to me about RPA, talk to me about a business challenge. And then apply a machine learning mindset, and then, and I agree with you, Tom. I think we're at the, the end of the beginning, if you will, of the deployment of these technologies in financial services. And I think as the tools get simpler to use, I didn't invent this term, but I love it. I think the goal is to create tools that turn us all into citizen data scientists. And I think that really, that's what we should be shooting at.
I largely agree with that. It's clearly, I mean, we talked about that continuum, and I think we saw the biggest benefits. If you look at the back office processing and automating processing, you know, robotics and RPA was probably the first wave where we saw like really significant impacts. And now we find there are harder things out there that we can't just put a bot in to do, and this is where you start getting to the benefit of these technologies. But I don't believe that in back office work we consider it a hype. I mean, it's not like I have in front of me like massive cost savings that I can realize because of this. Clearly there are some to be had, but it's about more than that, right? It's really making sure that the errors disappear. It's really making sure that your operational risk disappears. So but I don't think it's a hype.
It's certainly not a hype. I think it's a real need in the post-trade industry still to apply AI, and there are applications that are coming every day. I must say, us operating in the post-trade industry and detecting, providing solutions to detect manipulations in the financial market, we're excited recently by executing another project where a market infrastructure came to us. And they asked us, can you use AI to optimize the settlement efficiency? So that was amazing. We took the challenge and we proved them that they can use AI to reduce actually the collateral and the liquidity. So, and in the meantime, in the same time, to optimize the settlement efficiency. So this is a real use case, and I think what is important for businesses is to define precisely the use cases and then to see how AI can match these use cases, because the benefits are really very big.
Yeah, okay. Not hype. I've been put back in my place. That's fine. Should we go to an audience question? If that's showing up. So which of the following technology/capabilities will have the biggest impact on value for your business? I'll give you a few seconds to have your votes through the app on that question. I don't think it's live voting. I think the answers will come up shortly. Here we go. A resounding victory for machine learning at the moment. I mean, what do you?
That's a false positive. Here we go.
What do you expect to see here in the majority? Where's the red line going to fall?
RPA is more mature, I think, in most works.
Indeed.
Yeah, I expect that as well. I think that the biggest bang for your buck is still in the RPA space, given the challenges we still face in post-trade.
Yeah. Let's give it a few more seconds. And do you expect to see NLP and deep learning down there as well? Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's surprising because some of those aren't either-or questions, right? So even within RPA, the ability to kind of plug in parts of either machine learning or NLP within that process, it's sort of not an all-or-nothing kind of technology decision. So I'm sure there's a fair amount of overlap there.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks everyone for voting in that. What I really want to do now, and based on past panels that I've seen and past experiences at conferences, I think we've set the scene, but we really want to take it up a level now. And I think what's really exciting for people to hear is actual examples of rolling out this technology in your businesses or to customers. So can we talk about some use cases and actual examples? And John, I think you've got some exciting stories that you can share with us to start.
Yeah, and maybe not so much on the post-trade side, but maybe a little bit on sort of the process automation side, just from an investment perspective, just to kind of give a sense for some of the interesting things folks are doing with the technology. Morningstar kind of very much, rates funds, looks at sort of the investment performance across funds over a number of years. They had the situation where they'd set a human analyst that would kind of cover 100 some odd funds, look at sort of manage your tenure, performance, turnover, costs, things like that. They realized that their investment thesis was so data-driven that they could actually take those human analysts and look at their investment recommendations over a period of a decade or so, and then actually train a machine learning model that would act like their kind of investment analyst and actually look at the 1,000 some odd funds they didn't cover, right? Because generally there's a limitation to what people can do. And they began to basically use a combination of machine learning plus process automation that allowed them to sort of extend their business. But it also gave them quality of not just coverage, but insight, right? Because now you can see sort of the anomalies within your own investment process. So you could see what recommendations people typically liked. Oh, this analyst likes very stable fund with very stable dividends, and then suddenly they're kind of looking at this crypto fund. You can quickly kind of spot those anomalies within there. And so I think those abilities to look at large patterns of behavior and then infer the future is sort of just an example of what I think essentially we're all trying to do very much from a process automation side in the back end.
Yeah. And Christine, I know you've got some wonderful stories, and how about some specific ones in the context of security services?
Absolutely. So we were some years ago, we were pitching to one of the American banks for our fraud detection solutions. But actually, they challenged us. So they said, OK, that's good. You can learn from examples. But can you help us to detect manipulations in the foreign exchange execution data, where we cannot give you any simple example of manipulation? So they gave us the data, and they asked us to tell us what we can find in the data. So our team is very passionate about technology, and they like challenges, and they like to solve difficult problems. So we took this on board, and we came back with a methodology which is currently part of our solutions right now, which is able to measure and describe in real time the activity of the market and market participants by creating intelligent insights in the data. And this transformed data we use afterwards, and we apply machine learning algorithms, like specifically in this case, anomaly detection, to detect the suspicious activity. Now we prove that by using this methodology, we can in fact detect unknown cases and scenarios that they were previously unknown and remain undetected by the bank, and also previously unknown by the regulators. And we can also reduce dramatically the cost by minimizing the false alerts and by issuing only high-quality alerts. So that was very important for the bank, that we prove them that we can find examples and detect cases that they were not found by their systems, which were heavily based on rules, on rigid rules, operating with fixed parameters. So that's a good example. The other one I gave about optimizing the settlement efficiency, that we would never have thought that this is an application of AI.
Yeah.
Now we took this, and another bank came to us and they asked, can you take our equity data and do the same to detect spoofing, layering, and all kinds of this manipulative activity? So we use exactly the same methodology, and we were able now to expand to other asset classes like commodities, derivatives, fixed income, and even cross-market manipulation, which seems completely impossible. It's possible.
Right. And through the examples, people are now coming to you and saying, can you help us with other aspects?
Absolutely, absolutely. So if there is any interest, we are here present in the Discovery Zone at stand 45A. So please come by and watch some demos that we have on spot.
Good. Set you up nicely for that one. Should we come to the custodians here, and then Tom, to you, any examples rolling us out?
I think there's a few, and they're the domains that you would expect them in, right? So sanction screening, for instance, is one. Where, I mean, we operate a big dollar clearing business, so every day there's thousands of hits that you get on sanction screening. Because of the rule sets of the sanction screening software is pretty wide, because you want to make sure that you capture everything. We did a proof of concept, and we took an algorithm and we let it review all these false positives. And one of the first things they started doing is bucketing it, right? Saying what's likely to be a false positive, what's likely not to be a false positive, in 4 different buckets. And you quickly saw that the real false positives, 99 point something %, were in the 2 buckets that were highlighted, and then basically all the real hits were in the buckets that were highlighted. So that's an interesting thing, but that doesn't really give you the confidence to say, let's turn this on and stop reviewing all sanctions. So what we then did is we used it to classify them in categories of what is easy to investigate and what is hard to investigate. And basically that categorization and teeing up to individual groups of users that would review that actually reduced the time that a query took to resolve quite significantly. And that POC showed us that it was about 34% of time reduction that you could generate on that entire thing. So that's a promising thing, and that's really something that you say, okay, well, this is real, this works, and we can use this and take this forward. Second example is in instruction capture. You used to have OCR tools that can, when they are presented with a fixed template, they can actually get the information out and populate your transaction. And that's cool, but people don't always follow the templates, and as soon as that wasn't the case, it fell out and it was a manual exception. Well, now you have tools that can scan a whole page, actually pick up the right words within the page, wherever they are, and still construct an instruction from that. So that's a second example that kind of shows you some real benefits. And then the third one, final one, is in reconciliation. Unfortunately, our industry suffers with still a massive amount of people that do reconciliations. Our company, there are, there are more than 1,000 people that do that kind of activity. And once you start using some of the more intelligent reconciliation tools, you find patterns in breaks that leads to better resolution, but also show you analytics on how these breaks can be avoided in the future, and you can go back up the chain and talk to people that send you data in order to avoid these kind of breaks. We've been running that in one of our businesses and quite successfully, and we're now going to roll that out wider to the whole universe. And I think the interesting part becomes when you start using those tools, that you also start to see that you need different people to operate those tools, right? The people that operate, that basically manually start to clear breaks are not the same people that are going to parameterize, program, do these analytics on these data. So you need to scale your people differently, and generally that means upscaling, right, from clerks to engineers. Yeah. And that's an important part. And I think the second element that you see when you start implementing some of these tools is governance, right? It's about the control infrastructure that you have for people manually controlling one particular instruction is different than the controls that you need for people that actually interact with these tools, that parameterize these tools. And so again, you got to think about, if you roll this out more widely, how you're going to govern, how we're going to manage these tools, and how we're going to make sure that everything is still controlled, what we do in those tools. But I think those very practical things, that are happening today, and that basically say this is real, right? This is actually happening today.
Yeah, no, 3 real examples. That's great. Who says things aren't happening? Michael, any examples from your side?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been at this for a few years now within the firm, and what started out as an initiative called Process Revolution became a business transformation program with quite broad ambitions. And it turns out that some of these things that we utilize internally within our own firm to create our efficiencies, we can also make available to our clients directly. In fact, that's what I do. I run the fintech business at BBH, and my goal is to monetize every single one of those use cases and make them available to our clients so that they can improve the efficiency of their operations, because that's the end game for our industry. Yeah. And when you talk about the post-trade ecosystem, Tom touched on reconciliation. I mean, that's the sort of bane of existence in the back office in the post-trade world. So of course we've attacked that as well. And I guess you gave some good insights. So I'll give some specifics that kind of reinforce what you were saying. I mean, we looked at something as straightforward as cash breaks, cash transaction and position reconciliation. And that is something that all of us do in the security services world all day long. Ideally using our SWIFT statements, although those statements don't necessarily contain all the data you need to reconcile everything. But having said that, using traditional rules-based tools that all the banks have had for years, you can create procedural rules that will get you, for this particular class of data, we were seeing results in sort of the low 80s using the traditional tools. And what we did is we decided, because we had all this information, utilizing a tool that we have within BBH called Infomediary, which is something that we offer to our clients as well. And that tool and some other tools were used to bring data into an environment that then allowed us to create and to classify that data and build a supervised machine learning model. Yeah. So we did an original test of this with a large data set that we had. We ran it through the model, and then this literally over a weekend. We went from 82% so these are unmatched breaks, classifying unmatched breaks, 82% roughly into 95, 96%, with a 99% confidence level, to your point. And So if you think about that, right, just contemplate that for a minute, right? That particular process, I think you said 1,000 people in your firm, not just for that, obviously.
It's at 1,000 plus.
Yeah, a lot of people. Let's just say a lot of people in a lot of places doing this work. The difference between 82% and 100%, that's all the manual work left in that process. We just eliminated 2/3 of it over a weekend. Yeah. That's a profound impact. So that's why I think the investment's warranted, even those specialist skills, specialist tools. You have to build up the talent base, build up the innovation model, the machine learning thinking that leads to that. But that's a huge opportunity. So that's number one. Number two, this is in the domain of anomaly detection. One of the things we do at Brown Brothers is we are a fund administrator. So we produce unitized prices, unitized fund prices, net asset valuations, GAVs and NAVs for a large number of funds on a daily basis. And one of the things that we need to pay attention to is market price movements and ensure that the appropriate, accurate prices are being used, even if those prices can often be sourced based on the views of a particular individual on a particular broker or pricing source. So we pay a lot of attention to the accuracy of these prices. The traditional methods of doing that involved using what we call guardrail reporting, basically looking at percentage of market movements by asset category or subcategory, historically. And so that was all well and good, but for one particular large client set of funds would generate on a daily basis, could be in the vicinity of hundreds of thousands of potential exceptions. So then, there's a whole team of people spending all afternoon every day, more than a dozen people spending all afternoon every day with various tools, pounding down those exceptions to get them down to the less than 1% that actually should be analyzed. So through a multi-stage augmented intelligence process that involved NLP at the start, and then some data clustering techniques, K1, if anybody's interested in, or K-means rather, if anybody's interested. We're able to, which is just linear algebra, right? We were able to basically classify that data and eliminate all of the false positives down to that less than 1% level. So that's more than a dozen FTEs of work that just went away. That was for one large fund complex. So I think that's the size of the opportunity. And I'll end on the how we did it was really, as we said before, starting with a business challenge and iterating through the process and refining the model, getting it more and more accurate, and making sure, because it's a supervised model, that we had the right subject matter expertise looking at the results, back to explainability, right? I mean, at the end of the day, this stuff is just probability and pattern matching. So you still need an expert looking at the results and tuning them. And so once you get that, now that we've done that, we're taking our Infomediary offering and we're now linking in our machine learning services to that data transformation engine and performing those same types of activities for our clients.
Wonderful. Really great examples there from everyone. I'm going to skip forward a little bit because we're conscious of time. And I want to ask about trust. And as we move forward, you talk about image recognition, and there's some examples of certain technology not knowing a dog from a croissant. But do you fully trust AI with your clients? I think I'll start off with Tom and Mike again. Do you trust AI in all parts of the business? And at what parts of the chain do you kind of say, well, maybe we can't have AI deal with clients here? Yeah. I don't know who wants to take that first, Tom.
Yeah, I think, look, I think right now we're looking at decision support, that AI is decision support rather than making the decision. Mm-hmm. I mean, if I give you the example of sanction screening, clearly, you can't have, you can't blame the machine for letting through, what happened to be not a false positive, right? It is our responsibility, it is our liability, we're regulated institutions. So you can't let AI fully decide that. Maybe there will be a time when we do, right? But right now, I don't think that's the case. And so I look at it very much as decision support. Of course, when it comes to reconciliations, that's a different matter, right? There you can let AI do some of the work. But as I said, in my previous comment, control remains important, right? And the control infrastructure needs to evolve with the tools that you use.
Yeah, and it's replacing manual processes where there's much more chance of human error, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on
Yeah,
that?
yeah. I mean, you mentioned governance earlier. I think that's a very important part because a lot of this is an education process. And so I think that it's incumbent upon us, you know, whether we're, operations research professionals or technology professionals or business professionals to make sure that we have an audit trail, can evidence how we came to the decisions we did. I mean, in the post-trade world, again, I agree with you, it's support. You know, in some other domains, you know, there's an ethical considerations for sure. You know, if the machine's deciding whether you get a mortgage or not, or you know, whether the police should, you know, stop by your house that day, you know, that sort of thing. I mean, those kinds of things are not within our world.
Yeah.
So I think up to this point, it's been primarily about, you know, thinking about the right governance model, the right oversight constructs, and being able to evidence and demonstrate the decisions we made should our clients or our regulators want to delve deeper.
Yeah.
So we've prepared for those types of eventualities.
Yeah, and,
I think
please.
I think trust in the financial industry and usually in our lives comes a lot by doing and seeing the results. So I would encourage financial institutions to take and to test more applications. And I think AI is becoming a real necessity in the financial industry because of the increasing volumes of data that they are produced every day. Just to give you an example, a big stock exchange is producing tens of billions of messages per day. How can you analyze all this data just to detect manipulations, not talking about predicting the stocks and all this? It's impossible without using AI. The velocity at which the data is creating, it's unbelievable, it's amazing, the speed of creation of the data, but also the speed of at which the data is changing is unbelievable. So you need technology to deal with this. And also the variety of data. All these applications are producing data which are coming in different formats, and you need technology to bring all this together and to leverage all this. And I think one important point that people should take into account is the data veracity. How much can we trust the data? Coming back to the trust, I think the data governance and ensuring that you have the right and accurate data, that the data is not mistakenly saved or mistakenly transformed, is crucial in getting the results that you would like to get in all kinds of applications.
Yeah, I think that's important that everyone has a data management strategy and has things like chief data officers in place.
No, and I was just going to agree. Look, using statistical models to make business decisions is not new in financial services, and certainly most firms have fairly, you know, at this point, mature model governance processes, and it's very much the same process you'd use to look at machine learning models. I think the difference is, and very much when you're talking about an auditability, explainability perspective, the tools out there now, particularly if you're using a unified platform, that allow you to track kind of from the beginning of the data, how it's transformed, which models are being used, what the outputs were, what actually got you moved into production, sort of how it's performing, and then being able to kind of audit drift and detection. The tools out there now, from a governance perspective, are much more unified and sophisticated. And just in our own platform, it's far easier to actually demonstrate to a regulator that you've gone through that process. But there's still business judgment in there, whether you're using the appropriate model for the appropriate decision, and you're never going to be out of that process of making sure you're using the tools appropriately for the right business use cases.
Sure. Let's just wrap this up with one final question, I think. We're running out of time a little bit. And it's a simple one. Is AI transformational for the post-trade industry? And Michael, we'll start with you.
I think it is on the cusp of being transferred. We believe that, you know, as I said at the beginning, I mean, we think machine learning is the killer app, you know, in scare quotes, for the post-trade world. And we, you know, I mean, we're using it in the front office as well. Algos, as you said, have been there for some time. But so I think it's the disciplined and thoughtful application of these technologies, starting with a business problem to be focused on, iterating through the techniques until you find the right approach, and then applying the appropriate governance. I think that's the, and then you know, we've touched on data a few times, but I mean, that to me, you know, you were very clear on that, John. I think the one with the data wins in the end, right? So what that means is the one with with cleansed, classified data that's well understood, and is in a form that can then be further transformed.
Yeah.
Is, and that's not a new problem either. That's been enterprise data management has been a challenge for decades, and so I think we still have more to do there. But I think, as much as we can invest in these tools, we need to invest equally in our data assets.
Wonderful. Tom, you next.
Yeah, I think if you look at the benefits here, right, we're talking about reducing errors, reducing operational risk, reducing cost, and improving the client experience, right? And if AI can help us do that, then yes, it will be transformational for our business, and it can.
Wonderful. John?
I certainly wouldn't agree with Mike or Tom on that one. It's, look, we're seeing broad use, and so much of what we do as an industry, and certainly the transformation of our markets, has been automating what can be automated. Unfortunately, I'm still old enough to remember, people bidding in quarters in the pits, and it's that human process, unfortunately or fortunately, has gone away in kind of terms of efficiency, and that will be a process that has always, been in place and will continue to move forward. And so we'll see those optimizations across, and the firms that take advantage of them are the ones that are going to have advantages going forward.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I truly believe that AI is transformational. It's happening now. But I think this is just the beginning. And I cannot agree more with everyone here that you need to take several iterations and take it through steps and define the use cases and apply it, and then discover additional use cases and move gradually like this to develop further.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for your thoughts and the real examples of things actually happening in this sector. Please everyone join me in thanking John, Christina, Michael and Tom.